Do I need to add a description?
That's what it says. Okay, I'll just raise it.
Thank you. Love ya. All right, it looks like we are live and it's Tuesday, so happy Tuesday to everybody. Welcome to Tasting Tuesday. So, as always, if you're out there, say hello, tell us where you're from, what's in your glass, how's your day been, and yeah, let's see who's first here. So we have Jenna Morrison all the way from Richmond. We have Lynn Pentos, as always. Good evening to both you ladies. Nice to see you. So for those that weren't here last week, tonight's a little bit different. Just want to kind of talk about what we're doing. We got a request to do a blind tasting. So what we're doing tonight is tasting Cab Franc varietal wines. Went to the local wine store and said, need some wines. Let's make them Virginian. Let's try and keep them different vintages. Let's get some sort of folks and representation. So Virginia Wine Time, Paul and Warren, by the way, Stephen Tom, Mount Vernon, Tracy France from Davenport, Florida, Dave Maddox, Kefni Kring, our lovely tasting room a wine club manager rather from Keswick. Good evening to you, Kefni, and there's Sylvan Miller, Kathy Harden, and there's the Sugamellis with the Mathises and the Sleigh Bars, Judy and Odie. James Belithos from Williamsburg, Glenn Johnson, yeah. So as we were talking about, we are doing something a little bit different. And tonight what we're doing is tasting some wines that I know nothing about. I had labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you can see, they've all got foil on them. We will do a bit of a reveal later. But what I do know is that 4 out of the 5 are Virginian. 1 is not. I don't know the vintage. I hope I know the producers once we reveal them. But tonight is all about sort of tasting wines without any sort of psychological or philosophical kind of narrative. Meaning that, when you look at a label, or you look at a varietal, or you look at a producer, or you look at scores, whether it's Wine Spectator or Decanter, you start making assumptions based on this wine. And what we want to explore is, if we knew nothing about the wine and we tasted the wines just on their merits, how would we fare? Could we pick out number 1, the non-Virginia Cab Franc, and number 2, how would we rate the Cab Francs that we're trying tonight? Because as always, I think Virginia makes some of the best Cab Francs in the world. Certainly on par with what I think is the benchmark of Cab Franc, which is the Loire Valley, Anjou, Saumur, Touraine. So you're looking at Chinon, those kind of places. And obviously Cab Franc does extremely well on the right bank in Pomerol and Saint-Emilion over there as well. But in Virginia, I think there's different styles. Obviously vintage variation. If you think of years like 11 and 18 and 13, Cabernet Francs are going to be a little bit different than years like 10, which was a drought year, and certain years like 17 and 19. So let's say hi to a few more people. Rebecca Fortney, John Ferguson, good evening. And everyone, Earl Greaser and Jenna Morrison, and everyone's saying, what are you drinking? For me, I don't know, and we will find out later. But as always, we want to say hello. Thomas Barnes is calling in from Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Good evening to you, Thomas. Kevin Norfleet also from PA. Bob and Linda Sims are there. John and Becky are from Ruckersville, just around the corner from us. And if I missed, there's Brian Bissett. Some wonderful wines being opened. Virginia Wine Time's drinking Blenheim Vineyards, their Merlot. Maddox is drinking Barboursville's 2007 Octagon. Dennis is doing a couple of 2016 Cabernet Francs. And there's Steve and Roni Rader from Portsmouth. And then love.wine.dog, as Paul and Seth said, we pulled out 16 Cab Francs, a reserve and non-reserve, from Paradise Springs, Kirk Wiles. and fantastic people over there. And there's Alison Turcal. Alison and Tony, good evening to you as well. So before we jump into it, let's just wish everyone a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful week. I hope you've had a wonderful week. You know, the weather was incredibly hot and humid as we move into summertime. But I hope you've had a great week and week ahead. And as always, we appreciate your time. We know it's precious. We know you've got family to get to and dinners to have. So if you're with us, we greatly appreciate it as well. So again, blind tasting today. And thank you. I cannot remember who asked me to do this, but I'm a little bit nervous because I always want to be positive about Virginia wine. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be transparent. And hopefully I will be kind, and we certainly will reveal all 5 wines. So what we did, went to our local wine shop and again requested some wines and said, please kind of get us some wines. Let's do this. And obviously we're dealing with Cabernet Franc. So for those of you who've judged maybe competitions, who have done this at home, I'd love to know sort of your methodology of how you approach a blind tasting setting. Firstly, for me, if I drink a lot of wines, you've got to be spitting out. I'm not going to be spitting out tonight. So there is something called palate fatigue. I'm not sure how people can do hundreds of wines in a sitting and actually still have that same sort of refreshing palate. So I'd love to know how people do that. Secondly, do people go in with a sense of sort of expectation? Meaning that if you're judging Merlots or Cabernet Francs or Cabernet Sauvignons, are you judging the wines based on what you think or expect the varietal to be? In other words, we're dealing with Cab Francs tonight. So are you going to knock down a Cab Franc that's herbaceous or bell pepper? You know, could it just be vintage variation? What do you think of oak? You know, do you like oak? Do you think Cabernet Franc shouldn't take a lot of oak? Should it show more acidity and brightness? You know, should it be red spectrum, black spectrum? You know, what do you think of when you taste a wine blind? Or do you have an open mind thinking that let's get a baseline, let's taste wine number 1, and that's the baseline from which all wines are actually judged? So there's really some interesting questions, and I always have questions about blind tastings, about how sort of, you know, kind of neutral can you be? Because we all have palates and we have our favorites and stuff like that. Now, a lot of people are saying consensus. And you know, just with 4 wines over an hour or 2, how fatigued and difficult your palate comes. So a couple of things. What we did, we wanted to give all the wines the same sort of treatment. So they were all opened at the same time. The corks were all mixed up, so we couldn't look at it up. There are different shapes. Now, this bottle over here is tall and thin, so you're thinking perhaps that's a reserve bottling or at least a high end. You've got a couple of Cabernet Francs in sort of burgundy shape, and then certainly you've got a traditional Bordeaux shape. Now, that doesn't tell you which one's which, but certainly there are different shapes. The other thing is we've got 5 glasses, all exactly the same. You know, they were all washed at the same time. So other than maybe the wine itself, you know, if we were drinking a 10 versus a 15, a 13 through a 12, you know, that's obviously going to be different as well. Al says power through it. You know, so we'll go from there. So we're trying to keep it as fair as possible, but we're talking about Cab Franc. So let's discuss the grape, what it does in Virginia, and as we are as I'm pouring it as well. So we've spoken about Cab Franc before. It is a fairly sort of mid-season ripening grape. It ripens for us later than Merlot. It certainly ripens a little bit earlier than Cabernet Sauvignon. It is the parent, along with Sauvignon Blanc, of Cab Sav. So it has pedigree. It's generally found as a blending component. I mean, if you think of the world of wine, certainly in Bordeaux, it plays more of a prominent role in the right bank, the communes of Saint-Emilion and Pomerol. It does get used in the left bank, and that's the Medoc and the Haut-Medoc and Grave and the Pays-Soc-Lianen. You know, but it really is to an extent a supporting role with Cabernet Sauvignon, which dominates on the left. Now, varietally, obviously, my benchmark is the Loire Valley, which is a little bit north. Now, the Loire obviously is a cooler maritime to a cooler continental. You know, most of the Cabernet Franc comes from Anjou and Saumur and Touraine. But the style of wine from even Bordeaux to Loire is very, very different. Now, in the New World, you're finding a couple of varietals out in California, and certainly here in Virginia, we make quite a few Cab Francs. So it has a tendency to be a little bit green, bell pepper, because we're dealing with something called IP and IB, isopropyl and isobutyl methoxypyrazine, which makes it smell like a bell pepper. So I find that vintage, the environmental influences, the growing season, the heat, the rain, which for us probably impacts the grapes more than anything, has a profound effect. A cooler vintage, I think you get a lot of sort of menthol and eucalyptus, herbal, herbaceous kind of character. In dry vintage, it tends to be quite spicy, black pepper, white pepper. So it is a varietal that shows variation within the vintage, and then obviously in the hands of the winemaker. So again, if you're trying to cover up sort of green and underripe fruit, a lot of times oak is used. Let me know what you think of oak. I'm not a big fan of overusage of oak. I love oak when it's used deftly, or it's balanced, or the barrels, really conserve the flavor and the lift and the texture in the mid palate. I don't like a wine that smells like a barrel and tastes like a barrel, and you can't find anything else as well. So Cabernet Franc is a varietal for me that I have had to learn how to grow. I'm still learning how to make it, but I've always said that Virginia grows some of the best and makes some of the best examples of this varietal out there as well. So the first thing we're going to do, all the wines are poured. We've given them sort of equal pourings. And the way I'm going to tackle it, I'm not going to go left to right. I'm just going to, well, I guess I should go left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. A couple of comments already. Glenn Johnson says, double blind, judge noses and legs of each first, then taste slip, retaste several times with different food or chocolate, never more than 6 in my tastings. That's really comprehensive. So let's do that. Let's follow the Glenn Johnson kind of methodology when it comes to tasting wine. So if we go through the color, and let me show you, or rather, so number 1, certainly showing based on color, it has more sort of a garnet color. Now if you look, and I don't know if you can see it, now remember, red wines we judge at the rim instead of the core. And garnet means that there's a little bit more brown, there's a little bit more orange in there. So it's quite deep, so pretty extracted kind of wine based on color. But I'm guessing that if this is Virginia based on color, it's going to be one of the warmer years, sort of 17, 19. I think it's too young to see 20 vintage wines like that, plus it wouldn't show that sort of color. So I'm guessing it's got a little bit of age, but it's got really, really sort of lovely depth, but showing a little bit of garnet color. And again, as opposed to ruby, which would be more red, purple, obviously purple. And very similar to number 2 for me. Number 2 also has pretty deep color, showing a little bit more kind of garnet brown, and sort of kind of shows a little bit of oxidative kind of character on the palate, or on the color. Now that obviously with time, when wines are young, they tend to be mostly ruby, and obviously it could be sort of light or pale, medium, and dark. Basically, if you can not see how the stem kind of connects to the bowl or the glass, that would be deep. If you can sort of see it, but you can't really see your nails behind, I would say medium, and then sort of pale. And then you'd go from the core out to the rim as well. So number 1 and 2, very similar in color. I would say just based on color, these wines have got perhaps a couple of years age on them as well. Now wine number 3 has a little bit more ruby, and again, I don't know if you can see, but if you hold it at an angle, you look at that kind of rim there, that's showing a little bit more ruby, and perhaps maybe a lighter vintage, a wine that is a little bit younger in terms of age. So certainly I'm already thinking like 1 and 2 are a little bit older. Maybe number 3 is perhaps a touch younger. Number 4, again, showing some ruby, but they're all actually quite extracted. There's nothing sort of pale you can't see through these wines. They've actually got really, really lovely extraction. And number 5 is definitely sort of ruby, but they're all really, really lovely extracted wines, meaning that you can't see through them. They've got depth, they've got richness in terms of color. So you would think that these wines have been from good vintages. They've got really, really good cap management. You're trying to extract all those anthocyanins. And again, you got to remember that the wine and the color, there are additives that you can add, but certainly, for the most part, I know the winemakers in Virginia, and it's all about sort of the quality of the fruit, the ripeness of the fruit, the the development of the tannins, the developments of the flavors, and then obviously the developments of the anthocyanin kind of pigments in the skin. And when you have that, it's just a question of extracting it as well. So based on color, making some assumptions. Number 1 and 2 show a little bit more sort of garnet. 4 and 5 a little bit more ruby. 3 is interesting. It's sort of somewhere in the middle, I would say. So I'm already thinking personally that we're dealing with maybe a couple of years age on there as well, but not 100% sure. So let's start left to right. And as always, we want to say cheers, and God bless you and your families, and to your health and to prosperity for a wonderful year ahead. And as always, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, I've got my lovely wife sitting right next to me, and let us know what wines you're trying, how they taste, and let's go from there. So wine number 1, certainly a pretty aromatic wine. You know, you don't have to dig deep for it. It's certainly not pronounced in the sense that it hits you right here. Remember the chest and the chin and the nose. Can't really get it at the chest. Can certainly smell it at the chin. So it's got lovely aromatics. It's very smoky. You definitely can smell some wood and some barrel in there as well. Now, in terms of age, if we're looking at the color of the wine and we're thinking that it's got a bit of a sort of a color that sort of suggests that there's some time or that is a vintage, then you start looking at what sort of flavor components or aromatic components you're going to get first. Now, if the wine is young, you're going to deal a lot with sort of primary noses. Now, remember, primary is things that come from fermentation or come from the grape itself. So primary could be the fermentation, could be the heat of the fermentation, it could be the yeast they use, it could be the cap management, and certainly obviously the grape. Now, secondary aromas are really sort of barrel derived or aging. So it could be ML, and malolactic fermentation, which is decarboxylation of malic acid into lactic acid, so green apple into lactic acid. It could be lees work, you kind of stir up the dead yeast and you have sort of yeast autolysis. You could certainly have the barrel influence, and when we talk about barrel, we talk about French and American, but within that you deal with American, you have Virginia oak and Pennsylvania oak and Kentucky and Missouri, and French, Allier, Vosges, Nevers, Trancet, and then you have all these different types of toasting levels and air dried and all of that. So for me, I'm not getting a lot of sort of primary fruit aromas. I'm getting a little bit more sort of barrel aromas. I'm getting that smoke. I'm getting that coffee. I'm getting a little bit of that sort of toastiness there as well. And then you have slightly sort of a rustic kind of component. So I would definitely say, based on the nose, that this is a wine that is aging. It's not past its prime by any stretch of the imagination, but I wouldn't say it's young because I'm not getting a lot of primary fruit aromas. Primary, you could get spiciness or and spiciness, I guess, could be a barrel derived sort of secondary flavor as well. But there is some fruit in the background, but it is in the background. It's really a wine that's showing some development. I wouldn't say heavily developed. It's not very meaty. It's leathery and all of that, but it's got really nice sort of soil and forest floor, and it has a nice sort of rusticity to it, but it has a really lovely sort of fruited component on the back end there as well. So I'm thinking this is maybe like a 16, 17, 17, 18. I would discount 18 because if this is a Virginia wine and it does smell like a Virginia wine, 18 was such a wet year. If this is what was done in 18, this is phenomenal because that color is really nice and deep. So I'm thinking it's not a 19, it's too young, it's showing development. I'm thinking this is maybe 16 or 17. I would discount 18 because of the color, and I would say that it's a little bit aged because it's showing a little bit more secondary and tertiary flavors as well. So based on that, let's take a bit of a sip. Tannins are really nice. They're kind of grippy, but they're not austere. They're not chalky. They're not. They're really not green. There's no sort of greenness in there as well. It actually is. It's got nice acidity, and acidity is on the tip of your tongue. It has that sort of salivating effect. Now, count like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. This has got sort of nice medium acidity. The finish is quite long. I'm definitely getting more sort of dry herbs and potpourri flavors there as well. Maybe sort of a meatiness and a smokiness as well on the palate. But what I'm not getting is very sort of pyrazinic kind of characters there as well. So I would say that this is Virginian. It's got some fruit on the back end. It's showing some development. I would say sort of 16 or 17 vintage. So it's probably bottled in 18. So you're looking at around 2 to 3 years in the bottle. It's got really nice acidity. So I'm thinking that it's either a cooler vintage. So maybe 16, 17 was a little bit more voluminous in terms of flavor and generosity, or it comes from an area that is a little bit cooler. So a couple of places could be Northern Virginia, perhaps that harvest fruit maybe a week or two after us, could be a vineyard with some elevation, or a cooler vineyard, maybe a little bit more sort of Eastern Shore somewhere over there as well. But really like the wine, love the texture, love the richness on the palate as well. If you're looking for fruit, like big fruit bomby wines, this is gravitating away from that. It's showing a little bit more sort of developed character, which I like. And I might be totally wrong, but I would say that this is probably Virginia, and I'm guessing it's a 16 or 17 vintage. It's got the brightness, so it might be 16, but it's got some really nice sort of texture, so I'm thinking it might be 17. So who knows? Wine number 2, very similar in color. Again, it's showing a little bit of that garnet color, very, very similar to wine number 1. And again, ruby is more red-dominated pigmentation in the rim. Garnet, again, is more sort of brown and orange tinge in the rim. We judge it at the shallowest portion of white wines. You judge at the core or at the deepest portion of the wine. Red wines you judge at the rim as well. So based on the color, we've already made some assumptions. So very, very different to wine number 1. Wine number 2 has it's an interesting thing. It's almost like a Vegemite, Marmite-y, meaty, gamey kind of nose. I want to pour this for Kath. See what she thinks here as well. She's got an incredible palate, by the way. So there's wine number 2, love. If you want to smell it. She's been to South Africa and she's not a big fan of Marmite, but it has that sort of kind of yeasty, but it's got some really nice sort of toastiness there as well. But certainly a little bit more floral, perhaps. Certainly, I would say number 1's a touch more spicy. Number 2 is a little bit more dried fruit, dried flowers. It's probably not as aromatically intense as wine number 1, but really interesting in terms of sort of a little bit more garrigue, perhaps. So definitely, again, getting more sort of secondary and tertiary aromas. So I would sort of assess that again based on the color, based on the nose. We're looking at a wine that's got a little bit of time on it. Perhaps not more than, say, 5 years. So again, you're looking at that 16, 17. And again, you've also got to think about when you go to a wine shop and you buy wines, you're really not buying older wines, again, unless you're paying for Barolos or Sangioveses, the Montepulcianos, or you're paying for aged California wines. You're going to pay for that as well. These were really, really lovely and appropriately based wines. So I'm also thinking and cheating because I would say that older vintages like the 14s and the 10s and the 9s, which were great years, would probably cost a little bit more. So what do you think? What do you smell? Okay. Just saying, not idea. She's just had some food, so she's going to think about it a little bit there as well. But a little bit more sort of garrigue, a little bit more earthy, a little bit more soily. Number 1, a little bit different there as well. So quick taste. All right, so very different style of Cabernet Franc. This is showing there's not a lot of fruit on the palate. So again, I'm thinking that this is probably a little bit older. It's showing sort of developmental flavors there as well. And I'm getting a lot of sort of dried fruits, dried herbs, but really more sort of a rustic kind of character. It has that lovely earthy, kind of damp soil, forest floor, underbrush, almost brambly kind of character there as well. Now, when I think of that, I think sort of European. Now, I do know there is a wine in here that is not Virginian. I would say this is Virginian. It has sort of the brightness and the acidity. It has some really lovely flavors, but I would say, again, if you're looking for fruit wines that give you a lot of fruit on the wines. These are perhaps a little bit past that, but I think these are really highly complex and really intriguing kind of wines as well. So number one's got a little bit more texture, a little bit more thicker tannins. It has a longer sort of finish. Number two, finish is a little bit shorter. So either, what are we thinking? We're thinking maybe a cooler climate, cooler part of Virginia, or perhaps just not as much time in the barrel. So let's move on to number three. Off to a good start, and let me know how you guys are doing, and we'll go from there. So, all right. So wine number three has a different color altogether. It's certainly, again, showing probably a little bit more ruby than garnet itself, and that's by far the most floral and more sort of perfumey and a little bit more fruit forward of the bunch. Definitely showing on the nose a little bit more youthful. And when you think of Cabernet Franc, you think spice, and this has plenty of spice. So this is really pretty. It's probably the most, again, if you gravitate towards more fruit and younger wines, perhaps on the nose this might be the one that you would gravitate towards. It's probably the most floral and the most sort of pronounced nose there. And again, it shows a little bit. This is wine number three, my love. It shows a little bit more sort of youthfulness as well. Not showing more sort of. It's not showing a lot of sort of tertiary. I'm getting a little bit more sort of Cab Franc kind of character in there as well. Again, but nothing green, which is really lovely. So this is actually really quite soft and supple. Yeah, this is actually a little bit softer than 1 and 2. 1 and 2 slightly more grippy, a little bit more tannic. Wine number 3 is really, really soft. It's really supple. It's got really lovely sort of juicy fruits. It's a little bit savory, and savory for me is slightly green but not underripe, put it that way as well. So I would say if you're looking for a drinking wine, maybe number 3 is the one to open up in a glass and drink on its own. 1 and 2 might be a little bit more sort of food-friendly kind of wines there as well. I would say number 3 is probably a little bit younger. I'm not getting any greenness. So I'm looking for sort of vintages in Virginia that sort of speak to greenness, and that would be 2018 specifically. In between that, you've got 17 and 19. The 19 vintage wines would be really, really, really young. They'd be quite tight and quite closed down. 16 and 17 would probably be the vintages that I would guess you would see a little bit more of, because they're on the shelves, they are available, and let's go from there. So, all right, so wine number 3, a little bit more floral, a little bit more generous in sort of its juiciness and its fruitiness. It's quite soft, it's supple. They're all really well balanced, and balanced for me again is the acidity, the alcohol, the acid, and the fruit are all harmonious. Nothing is jumping out in terms of a component that is either it's too acidic or it's too fruit forward or anything like that. I don't think we found the outlier though. I think this is Virginian. I feel like this is a wine I've had. I'm not sure. I'm thinking this is Monticello, but I'm not 100% sure. All right, so let's move on to wine number 4. Wine number 4 again is showing it's showing more ruby as opposed to sort of garnet, and that is the most different wine aromatically of the bunch. Let me go to number 5. 4 and 5. 5 is really, really interesting. So I'm saying 1, 2, and 3 were in the great state of Virginia. There are similarities in terms of kind of varietal. Number 4 and number 5 aromatically are incredibly, incredibly different. So let's go with number 4. It's got more on the ruby rim, so it's closer in color to number 3. It is really pronounced, but it has sort of like a cola kind of nose. It has sort of a stemminess though. So this is showing the most green kind of character. It has that sort of pyrazinic character. for me. So this is the wine that I would sort of go, it's either French, possibly Italian, or maybe a 2018 from Virginia. So the color's really nice though. It's got really lovely color. So again, if this is a Virginia wine and this is 2018, it would totally, kind of explain the nose. The color is really, really great though. So whoever made this wine, if it is Virginia and if it's 2018, that's a phenomenal job in terms of extraction, because we didn't even make a Cabernet Franc in 2018 because I couldn't get the color like this. So I'm going to guess this is the outlier. I'm going to guess this is French. I'm thinking this is somewhere from the Loire. It just has a rusticity to it. It has a sort of a mintiness and herbal kind of character. Not like an underripe. It just smells to me like this is a cooler region. And again, when we spoke about the Loire, we're talking about sort of cool continental, cool maritime. If you go from sort of the east to the west, and again, it's what's that? The Nantais, Anjou, Saumur, and then you go into Touraine, and then you go into the central. It is cool. It's quite north. It's north of Bordeaux, obviously. Cabernet Franc. You're thinking of Saumur, Chinon, Champagny. You're thinking of Bourgogne, something like that. So I'm in that region. Cabernet Franc does go in Italy, and you're talking maybe central Italy. And that's Maremma and Bulgaria and Toscana, but it's actually more sort of warm Mediterranean. I'm not getting warmth from this wine. I'm not getting a lot of alcohol. I'm not getting a lot of fruit. I'm not getting a lot of really extracted kind of winemaking and a lot of big barrels. So I would eliminate that. I'm thinking this is squarely French, and I would say somewhere in the Loire as well. So it's a really pretty nose. We have a really, really, really pretty nose here, but it is the greenest of the bunch. It makes number 3 just extremely sort of aromatic, extremely sort of candied in a way. And here's the other thing though, it is interesting to see how the order of wines affects the next wine, right? If you taste a wine that's really sort of is really sort of green, and then you go to a wine that's a little bit riper, it's gonna taste a little bit amplified than that, and again vice versa. So it's what I find very difficult about blind tasting is how do you judge wines based on their character, right? So yeah, I find, and I'm amazed at people who can taste that many wines and go back and forth, because I'm finding it really, really difficult. Number 3 had a beautifully sort of fruit forward, but when you go from number 4, which is very green and very pyrazinic, to number 3, it makes it even more candied and sweeter on the nose as well. The more I'm smelling this, I'm thinking this is Loire. I'm thinking this is cool climate, Cabernet Franc, very typical of either Chinon Bourgogne or Saumur Champagny. It's quite soft. The acidity is a little brighter. And again, that makes me think sort of cool climate. Or again, Virginia has some cool sites. We also have some vintages that we don't get ripe, so that conservation of acidity because we don't get the ripeness. But I would eliminate Virginia just because of the color. I think if it were this sort of green and this sort of acidic, I'm thinking 18, but I think the color would be a lot lighter as well. So I'm thinking 1 and 2, 16, 17 vintage, 3, not sure, but Virginia, number 4. Did you try number 3? Just giving me a big old smile, and just kind of got a head in there and just kind of done him. Again, amazing palette there on the right. All right, and let's move on to 5 because we've got some questions, I guess, that we want to get to. Number 5 is the most intriguing, and I'd say it that way. It's very, very sort of very, very sweet smelling on the nose. It's really got nice extraction. It's got ruby on the end. That is very juicy, probably the most juicy out of all of them. So it almost tastes like it's got maybe a touch of residual sugar in the wine. This is probably in terms of if you were new to wine, you would definitely like number 5. If you like wines that are a little greener, I think number 4 is the way to go. If you like wines with a little bit of age, number 1 and 2 are the way to go. But wine is, at the end of the day, is your personal preference, right? It's drink what you like, how you like, when you like. But the great thing about blind tastings is really sort of taking, hopefully, the bias out of it. But the question I really have is, can you really take your biasm out? Can you appreciate a wine that's made in a different style that either as a winemaker you don't do, or if you like fruit-forward wines, can you judge a wine that's green or herbaceous or whatever it is? Can you judge it honestly and effectively? I doubt I could. I think I would knock the wines down because it's not what I expect from Cab Franc. So at the end of the day, is there a certain amount of biasm when it comes to wine? I guess that's the question. So what I'd like to do is sort of let them sit for a while, see if there's 1 or 2 comments or questions that we can answer, go through them again. As Mr. Johnson says, we go through them once, have a quick taste again, and then we'll go from there. So what do you think, sweetheart? Are there any comments? Are there any questions?
Rebecca Fortney asked, do you know the price range of the wines that you're trying?
Yeah, I think they're all between 20 and 30. So again, if the wines are in that range, I don't think you're dealing with really old wines. Cabernet Franc for me is some of the best value to money, and they're all between $20 and $30 a bottle. So well within everybody's budget, and Cabernet Franc is certainly wines that you need to drink, without a doubt.
And John Ferguson asked, who chose the wines that you're trying?
So we wanted a smattering. Obviously, if I were to choose, I would go Goodlow Mountain. I would do Our Block 2. There's a couple of others. I think there's King's makes their small batch series. So the local wine shop had some recommendations on things that are esoteric. And then I did grab one that I had downstairs. So I know one. But for the rest, it was the kind lady at the wine shop that I stopped in at. So, yeah.
And David Maddox said, are you actually detecting the local character and in particular the latitude when you're trying them on?
No, not at all. I'm not on that level, Dave. I think there's similarities between the wines that we're tasting. Now, if you were to taste, I think Virginia wines would stand out in a flight of South African or Californian or Australian Cab Francs. I think when you go to someone like France, you really there are similarities. So are we getting a regional character? No. Are we getting some similarities between 3 out of the 5 wines? Without a doubt. So no, I'm not judging sort of a latitude or a cooler vintage, but we look at a couple of things. The colors are, and again, I don't have a white background, so I can't show you, but there is a difference, between 1 and number 3. And I don't know if you can see it, love. If this one over here is a little more browner on the edge, and number 3 is much more ruby on the edge, more red. So even you can definitely see the color there. She's been smelling. You can see there's an aromatic difference in there as well. Can we do it this way? Yeah. All right. So how do we do 1 and 3? Would it be? All right. I can't see.
Oh,
so
sorry.
there you go. So here's number 1. There's number 3. I'm not sure if you can see the screen. And get my hands out of the way and tip them either. But number 1, this one over here, definitely has a little bit more garnet, and number 3 definitely has a little bit more ruby. So color certainly is not a determining factor in terms of quality, but it can sort of give you an idea that maybe one is a little bit older than the other. The other thing is aromatically, right? So when you're looking at wines, when I do, I'm looking at sort of is it primary, is it secondary, or is it tertiary? So if it's primary, it's going to be young. Tertiary, it's going to be sort of showing some aging, and it's certainly none of these wines have reached their, I would say, are past their prime. I'd say none of these wines are fully developed. They are showing some tertiary, but showing some secondary and slight sort of primary flavors in there as well. So fully developed wines are showing extremely tertiary based wines. And I'm getting some tertiary characteristics in definitely number 1 and 2, but there are some really lovely secondary, which more comes from the barrels. So I'd be really interested to see which barrels or kind of winemakers these are from. Then you're certainly looking at acidity. Cab Franc has acidity, as does Cab Sav. You know, the wines with a slightly more acidic kind of nature, you're thinking perhaps cooler vintage, cooler site, you know, and cooler vintages in Virginia certainly, you know, like 13 and 18, you know, 16 even would have more acidity than something like 17 and 19. I'm discounting that these wines are 20 because the 20s are being bottled. I know we've bottled some 20s, but would they be on the market this early, and would they show some secondary and tertiary right now? I don't think so. I don't know many wineries that are releasing a 20 kind of vintage wine. And then obviously on the palate, you're looking at the flavors, you know, and again, you know, when you think of Cabernet Franc, you think spicy, or you think green, or you think whatever it may be. You know, there are some flavor or aromatic characteristics in 1, 2, and 3 that suggest that these might be from the same area. And because I know that 4 out of the 5 are Virginian, I'm thinking that's the same. Number 4 is very, very different. And that's why I would say that it is French. And it is very green. And you smell that, love. You've got number 3 in your glass, and there's number 4. You know, the colors, if you look at it, what do you think, sweetie? The colors look very similar, right? They show a little bit more ruby on the edge there. But if you smell them, you know, she's smelling number 4 now. Very sort of stemmy and herbaceous. And then you go to number 3, and number 3 smells just incredibly fruit forward. It's crazy. So if 3, 2, and 1 are very similar, 3 is definitely the most fruit forward. And 4 is very different. Yeah, you get it as well. So I'm thinking this is very much Loire, and it has that sort of stemmy, green kind of characteristic there as well. And then number 5 is confusing. I'll be honest. And there's 5. You know, 5 again. It's almost sweetish on the palate, sweetish on the nose. It tastes like there's a touch of RS in there as well. It's probably the wine that probably doesn't have much oak. It just tastes a little bit sweetish and candyish to me, and you know, I'm trying to be kind as a Cab Franc, you know, grower. Keswick's Cab Francs, you know, tend to be a little bit different style than some of these. So yeah, you know, that's the assessment. So let me go through them once again very, very quickly, and I will write down. Can I write down on this, love? Okay, I'm gonna write down. So number 1, I would say. Number 1, again, it's showing a lot of smoky and toasty and sort of barrel-derived characteristics. I would say this is probably a reserve bottling. Now, it is the tallest of the bunch, so I'm saying it's probably a reserve bottling, so it probably has spent some time in barrel. I'm saying it is Virginia, and I'm saying it's either 2016 or 2017. It's possibly a reserve. And I have no idea which area in Virginia. Again, Monticello does some incredible Virginia wines, but so does Shenandoah, so does Northern Virginia. There's some incredible wines that are coming out of there as well. Number 2. Number 2's got a different nose. Again, for me, it's a little bit more marmite-y or veggie. It's a little bit more sort of cured meats, smoked meats. Again, it's showing some development. So I'm saying that Virginia. I'm probably saying that's 2017 because it's actually quite big. There's some really nice barrels on this. I'm probably saying it's French oak barrels, and yeah, 2017 Virginia wine. And this tastes a little bit more acidic, so I wouldn't say central. I would say this is maybe a cooler vineyard in Shenandoah or up north. You know, sort of Northern Virginia, somewhere there. Because Northern Virginia are a little bit later than us. They harvest a little bit later than us. So I'm thinking just because the acidity and the brightness, even though this wine is showing a little bit of age, I would say that this is probably a non-central Virginia wine, put it that way. All right. Number 3 is very pretty. God, it's really pretty. It's a very well-made wine. It's got a lot of sort of floral fruit. It's definitely showing more fruit than the first 2. That could be a 17 or a 19. So I'm going to go 2017 or 2019. It's really balanced. It's showing some secondary, a lot of primary. So I'm saying it's probably a little bit younger. I'm not getting any sort of tertiary, and again tertiary, the leather and the mushroom and the smoke and the cigar box and the meatiness somewhere as well. And that's why I'd say number 2, especially, is a little bit older. I'm going to say this is central. I feel this is a wine that I've had, so I'm thinking this is one of the big guys within the Monticello AVA. Number 3 I really like, personally, so far. Number 4 is the greenest. So I'm going to say that is Loire, probably 2017, maybe 2018. It's just got that sort of stemminess and that herbaceousness. It has that sort of greenness to it as well. And again, it's not an underripe, it comes across like a cool climate Cabernet Franc. I would say this is the outlier. This is the non-Virginia wine, and I would say that is probably Loire. If you think of any other Cab Francs, I just don't get that character outside of the Loire. And then number 5 is definitely the most interesting. It's the sweetest. It's got a sweet sort of candied nose. It's got a lot of fruit, a lot of juicy red fruits. This tastes the youngest, so 2018, 2019. It is a light and fruity palate. It probably won't age as long as the other wines there as well. So that's it. There it is. I don't know if you can see it, but I don't know. Written it down. So, I don't know. Is anyone still watching, Kath? Because I can't see. But I can see some comments. There we go. So let's see. Are there any new comments? So, okay. So last sort of run through. If you're new to wine and want something that's really pleasing, wine that you could probably serve a little bit chilled, I think number 5 is the one to go. My favorite is I like them all for different reasons. So number 3 I like today probably the best. I think it's really well balanced. It's really well made. And wines 1 and 2 I really, really, really like. But you want food with them. You want sort of truffles or risotto or mushrooms or meat or something like that. I think these are food wines. These are wines that are probably showing a little bit of age. I think they're extremely well made. I think they're probably from really, really good vintages. And then number 4, I don't know enough about vintages. If this is French, I would say that we'll go from there. So, trying to be kind, trying to be nice. So why don't we start with what I think is the outlier, and that is wine number 4. So there you go. So we said, what did we say? Loire. Oh god. And I did pass my SET tasting exam, by the way. I got the results for that, so I'm pretty chuffed and pumped about that. So wine number 4 is Bourgogne. It is Loire. It is the Domaine Guillaume. It is Bourgogne. The price of this is $24.95. This is the Val de Loire, and the vintage is 2017. All right, so I got the vintage wrong, but Bourgogne, Chinon, not Chinon. So again, from the Loire Valley, it has that sort of kind of interesting sort of herbaceousness and stemminess to it as well. Really, really pretty. Now, these wines were decanted for 1 hour only. It'd be really interesting to see what a little bit of time would do on that as well. Want to do 1 and 2 because 1 and 2 taste a little bit older. So let's do number 1. So number 1, thought Virginia 16. If pressed for a vintage, I'm thinking maybe 17. 17 is just a little bit warmer. This one has it shows a little bit more sort of age. So I'm thinking 16 or 17. and I'm thinking this is Virginia, and I really liked it. It's a wine that is really quite smoky. It's not showing a lot of really upfront fruit, but it's got really lovely palate. The tannins are quite grippy. I think this is definitely a food wine as well. Lee Hartman's wine, Bluestone Vineyards, Shenandoah Valley, Estate Grown, 2017. Now, if you are at a computer and can Google these wines very quickly and find out, I don't know. I know Lee, obviously. I know he does some really, really incredible wines. He was in the governor's case for his Petit Manseng, I believe. He makes his blue ice is just phenomenal. His Chardonnays are great. He's a hell of a winemaker, super nice guy as well. I really, really like that. I would love to know, doesn't say anything on the back, and other people are asking the alcohol. God, I really need my glasses. Can you let me know what the alcohol in there as well?
13%.
So 13%. So really, really great job for a wine that is 13%. Again, so Shenandoah Vineyard is actually warm. It gets parts of it are quite cool, but it gets less rain than central Virginia and the Monticello AVA. So 2017, certainly lovely wine. Yeah, really great job. Really, really like Lee, and I hope I was kind about his wine. Number 2, again, very similar in that, but I would say this is not a central Virginia. I would have guessed Shenandoah or up north, and I'm also thinking maybe 2017. And interesting bottle shape. So burgundy bottle shape. So let's have a look. Barbara Polton, what is the first wine? The first wine, which for us was number 4, that was the Bourget, the Domaine Guillaume. Wine number 1, which I liked, but it showed a little bit older, was the Bluestone 2017. Wine number 2 is very similar. So again, either in the Shenandoah, maybe up north. Bro Vineyards 2017. God, I really can't see anything here. Again, my love, alcohol 13.8%, so a little bit riper. Bro Vineyards, so Jen Bro and family, Cabernet Franc Reserve. So again, probably, I don't know if they make a house wine or not, but again, if folks can look it up and let me know sort of oak or time and barrel or something like that. A reserve would be either less made of it, or some of their highest quality fruit, or sees a portion of newer oak, or spends more time in the barrel than anything else. But Bro Vineyards, fantastic people. They are up in Loudoun County, I believe. Are they in Loudoun or Middleburg? Percival, excuse me. But they are great friends of ours up in Northern Virginia. Fantastic. And they also were in the governor's case, and I believe they have 2 wines in the governor's case. So good credit to them. Fantastic producers. They do a Nebbiolo that's fantastic, and their Meritage wine as well. So folks from North. Number 5 threw me a little bit. I'm not sure about number 5. Again, this is the wine that was quite sweet and quite fruity. Again, if you're new to wine and not 100% sure about Cabernet Franc, this might be the wine to start off with. So let's have a look. Wine number 5. All right, I have never seen this label. This is Vino del Bosco, and again, the alcohol is 13%. Blue Ridge Vineyards. Oh, sweetheart, my lord, I have to ask my wife to read this label, because I'm not 100% sure who makes this wine whatsoever.
Bear Ridge Vineyard, Rockingham County, Virginia.
Barren Ridge?
Bear, B-A-E-R Ridge.
Bear Ridge Vineyards out in Rockingham County, Virginia. I have never had this wine, never heard this wine. It's produced and bottled by Independence Inc. $25. Vino del Bosco Cabernet Franc 2020. 2020. We were just talking about the vintages and how these young. So that would maybe explain sort of the fruitiness. I wonder if this was slightly, someone's got to check this out for me, if this was sort of carbonic macerated. if there was any sort of carbonic kind of action going on there, because it is really, really sort of sweet and fruity, and probably has a little bit of sort of residual on the nose. So double check. I'd love to know if that was carbonic macerated or semi-carbonic or something like that, because it has that really, really sort of inherent sweetness to it as well. Wine number 3 was, for me, today, the best of the bunch. I loved 1 and 2, and again, these are wines you're going to go have with dinner. Number 3, I think, was just extremely well made. It's a 17 or a 19, I would imagine. I do think it's a Monticello wine. Dave Maddox says, I think there was some manipulation on that one, meaning on the 5th one. I don't know anything about Vino del Bosco. I will look it up, but it's a 2020, so a wine that probably has been bottled, gosh, very, very quickly. I'm going to learn how they made it, because there is intense fruit. 2020 was the year, obviously, we all think of it as COVID, but as producers, obviously very frost dominated, Mother's Day frost. The most interesting for me, and probably the most pleasing, if you're going to sort of if you're going to drink wine and you're new to wine, you don't want something too tannic and too big, I think number 5 would be the way to go. And I think at the end of the day, the point of this is not to pick out what we think is the best, but we also to celebrate the diversity of the same varietal in the state thereof. But number 3 for me was the one I liked today, and again, time will tell. So really excited to see number 3. Number 3 is Early Mountain Vineyards 2017 Quaker Run Vineyards. So Ben Jordan, winemaker, Monticello AVA. Are they in the Monticello AVA? Yeah, they are. Quaker Run Vineyards. The alcohol on this is 14.1. Certainly doesn't show. It shows a lot more youthful than the first 2, which were 2017 vintages as well. Quaker Run. When I think of Quaker Run, it's a fantastic little property. Their Quaker Run Chardonnay is one of my favorite chards in the whole state. This is fantastic. It's really well balanced. It's really made, but sort of in an understated way. And I want to go back to it as well. It is really, really, really well made. So congrats to Ben Jordan and team. This is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful site. It makes some of their best wines. And go from there. It's showing a little bit more savory. It's got really nice fruit. It's got nice balance. They're beautiful wines. So Virginia does make incredible Cabernet Francs, and I don't know what you thought, but really interesting, different sort of take on Tasting Tuesdays. Again, when you have a label in front of you, have a wine, a little bit about it, and certainly when you make it, you have your sort of preconceived ideas. But at the end of the day, the point is to have fun. Have fun with wine, learn about wine, try something different, drink local, and explore and expand your palate as well. A couple of things I was answered. Comedy night. Everyone needs a laugh. June 11th is comedy night at Keswick Vineyards. There are a few tickets available. Do you know the time, Love? I think they start at 7.
The doors open at 6:30 and the show starts at 8.
Doors open at 6:30. Get a glass of wine, get a table. They're all local comedians. They're fantastic. Come and share an evening and have some laughter with local comedians and friends and family of yours. So keswickvineyards.com, or call the tasting room if you would love to come to one of the comedy events as well. In terms of next week we're looking to take a break. Just to talk very, very briefly, we have done Tasting Tuesdays pretty much every Tuesday for 15 months. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a bit of a break, and we're going to come right back. We're going to announce a great bundle and some guests, and trying to do different things. To that extent, if you want us to invite someone, talk to someone, or talk about something, please let us know. we would love to know what you think and what you want us to do. At the end of the day, we want to celebrate each other, celebrate Virginia wine, drink local, explore local, and be proud of the local product out there. So, am I missing anything? Do we have anything else going on at the winery? Weather is beautiful. Staff are vaccinated. Come and visit us. We're open Monday through Sunday, 10 to 5. We have plenty of space and plenty of space for you to feel kind of safe. And we have music. We have food trucks every Saturday. So not only can you listen to wonderful music, enjoy great wine, but you can also sort of fulfill your belly and make sure you walk out of there having a wonderful day. Bring the family. We're pet friendly. We're kid friendly. And we would love to have you at Keswick Vineyards. But again, at the end of the day, like I said, all raising tides raise all ships. So support local, drink local. And that means wine, cider, spirits, food, and that's about it. So I don't know if there's any other questions that we can jump to. We do have one or two before we finish up.
So this will probably be too long of an answer to go through.
Oh lordy, she knows me well.
Do you have certain markers for Cab Franc for different regions? Like, are there certain things that you taste or smell that points you in the direction of a certain region? This is from Donegal.
So Donegal.
I always say
So yes, having gone through the SET and written, you focus a lot on climate, and at the end of the day, what climate and soil and growing seasons do to vines. So there are certain things that perhaps could lead you in a certain direction. Certainly Cabernet Franc, I'm not very good at tasting. I'm much better with something like Sauvignon Blanc or even Cabernet Sauvignon. So color can really show you a couple of things. But again, I got the vintages, pretty spot on for the first two, but the third one I said 17 or 19 because it didn't show, sort of aged kind of character there as well. So I don't know if, I'd love to go back and say, when was this wine bottled? If Ben kept the wine in barrel for 18 months, as opposed to Jen and Lee kept in barrel for 9, the 17 would obviously show more of a bright color because it is young and it has more tannin. So certainly color is one. It can tell you one or two things. Aromatically, I think, is the most important. There are certain sort of flavor descriptors, especially if you know the varietal. So when you have Merlot or Cab Franc, you are already kind of going in one direction there as well. Alcohol levels, higher alcohol levels mean, higher sugars, which mean warmer climates. So if you're dealing with 15% alcohol, you can certainly discount cooler regions like Germany or Austria or even France, for instance, which is a moderate maritime climate in Bordeaux, which is cool maritime and cool continental in the Loire. The warmest part of France is obviously, the Languedoc-Roussillon or the Southern Rhone, which is warm Mediterranean. So when you think of high alcohol levels, you always think South Africa, Chile, Australia, and California. When you're dealing with high acid levels, you think of sort of cool regions or elevations. So things like Argentina, which has ripeness, it has high luminosity, because the further south from the equator you go, you get longer days. But with elevation, you get conservation of acidity, so you have that. And then certainly tannins can tell a little bit about oak usage and time, and then the body and the length and stuff like that. So wine tasting is a little bit of luck. It's a little bit of having tasted it before, and it's a little bit of eliminating what it really couldn't be. And then from there, it's just about bloody enjoying it and going from there. So every wine has a unique flavor descriptor and then should show a sense of place. But then you have the influence of the winemaker that can really sometimes cover up terroir. Oak is not terroir. Additives is not terroir. So Michael Bissett said we had to look up number 5, and the Vino del Bosco is a Gabriele Rossi product. And Gabriele is probably the most lovely person in Virginia, and I credit him with all things good that comes out of there. But Michael, if you've looked it up, do you know how they made it? Being a 2020, was it... I feel that there's a little bit of sort of carbonic in there as well. Sylvia says we would love to see you have a chat with Jeff White. Jeff White, obviously, of Glen Manor up in Northern Virginia. I will write that down and we'll see if we can get Jeff White on. He is phenomenal. I think his Sauvignon Blanc and his Glen Manor Red is just his Hotter Hill rather is phenomenal. But at the end of the day, it's all about learning. It's about exploring. But at the end of the day, it's about sharing and caring and sharing it with people you enjoy being around. So I probably will get on next week just to talk about very briefly the bundle, but we're not going to do a formal sort of tasting Tuesday. Like I said, we're going to take a bit of a breather, and we will come back to you with some really, really cool products and cool people. So let us know if there's anything that we can do to make this interesting or more interesting. But as always, we want to finish up. So I am going to pour a glass of number 3. I'm going to say thank you to my wife. Behind the scenes, Kath has been amazing. Not only does she do compliance at Keswick and is a Disney travel agent, she's a mom to 2 little rascal hurricanes and a daughter that requires all her attention. She's a wife to me, and she keeps everything running. So thank you for 15 months of hard work and doing it with no bloody sleep. I haven't seen anyone not sleep for 15 months and still kind of keep it all together. So love her to death and appreciate everything she does behind the scenes. And then obviously to you guys as well. Thank you for all the support. And then again, I also always want to say thank you to our staff and our team and Al and Cindy and all the people that make Keswick work. It's been really, really, really great. So we will come on next week to talk about the bundle and what we have planned. But the following Tuesday, we will come back with smiles and positive attitudes. But until then, as always, we want to say God bless and love to your families and to you. Appreciate your generosity and your support. Appreciate all your time spent with us. Have a great, great, great day. Be kind, be good, tell people you love them. And if you do that, the world cannot but be a better place. So until then, love to all. See ya. Sorry, I couldn't find stop.